Welcome to EI Cafe with Azim, in which he reflects on key aspects of life and business through the lens of emotional intelligence. You will learn how emotional intelligence can be used for your success in both personal and professional lives. The podcasts cover topics on leadership, collaboration, culture, building a positive mindset, and even raising kids. You will hear key life lessons and tips from the most prominent personalities, business leaders, entrepreneurs, EI practitioners, and executive coaches from around the world. So sit back, relax with a cup of coffee as we get into today's show, EI Cafe with Azim.
In an era where authenticity and genuine human connections are paramount, today we explore in this episode the significance of embracing vulnerability as a strength rather than a weakness in leadership. The transformative power of human-centered approaches, fostering a deeper understanding of how vulnerability can be harnessed to create more compassionate, resilient, effective leadership strategies. So, join us to discover profound importance of impactful leadership. A very warm welcome to the show. This is EI Cafe with Azim Season 10, and I'm your host Azim Sahira, Human Capital Specialist, a legacy display facilitator, ICF certified, PCS level coach, and emotional intelligence and emotional cultivating. I'm one of the lead facilitators at Dominion Learning Solutions. You had the topic we're going to talk about vulnerability and around the human-centered leadership approach. To have this conversation, I have a fantastic individual who's joining all the way from UK. Let me welcome founder, Ignitor Inner Potential, leadership development and emotional intelligence specialist, and a podcast host, Kul Mahay.
Great to be here, Razin.
All right. Cool. Welcome to the cafe.
Hey, it's great to be here. I love the round of applause there.
It's a bit of virtual context and more giving that inner feeling that we are in a studio.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I've been on a lot of podcasts. I've never had a round of applause for a podcast, so that's a really nice experience.
All right. So that's something good to hear for me. Right. So, Gul, thank you very much for your valuable time you're going to spend. We're going to spend about 30 minutes or so to talk about the important context in today's era and the time. At the same time, it's very close to your heart as well, right? So I'm really curious to start off. Let's talk about vulnerability. What is your thought on vulnerability and why it's important in today's context?
Oh goodness. I mean, where to start with vulnerability? I've been in the leadership space now for nearly 30 years. I started my life off 40 years ago in the UK police service and, went on to become a very senior police officer. And one thing that I learned throughout all of that experience is that as a leader, there are expectations of you. And I found that from my peers and from my organization and sometimes from my staff, there was this expectation for me to be strong, consistently and constantly strong, because people were looking to me for a sense of direction, to be decisive, particularly when we were dealing with, highly critical situations. I was what they call a gold commander, which meant that any serious, major, critical incident that was occurring, I would be the person making the ultimate decisions. Now, when you are in a position like that, it's very difficult for you to understand the power of vulnerability because you want to espouse this sense of power, this sense of calm, this sense of control. So I was always led that this is what leadership is, that leadership is about being this pillar of strength that your people can look up to.
Yeah.
But as time has gone on, I've realized that actually leadership is not about that.
Mm,
There are times in our lives when you have fast-moving dynamic situations where you have to adopt a leadership style which is pretty much command and control, where you tell people what to do because you haven't got the time to
mm,
explain or discuss things.
mm,
But actually, 95% of the time, leadership is about people. It's about human beings. It's about being a human-centered leader. It's about getting the very best out of people.
mm.
And I believe that the only way that you can get the very best out of people is by being human yourself.
Absolutely.
It's about letting people see that the person that is leading them is actually a human being, just like they are. They have the
Mm,
same anxieties, they have the same challenges, they have the same aspirations, perhaps,
mm,
but they have the same vulnerabilities that
mm,
most human beings have in the world.
mm,
I don't think I've ever met in my entire life. I have never met a person who is 100% confident in who they are. Never.
mm, mm,
Because
mm,
the beauty of being a human being is that we are beautifully imperfect. We're perfectly imperfect. And vulnerability is about that. Vulnerability for me is about embracing our
mm,
individual and
mm,
collective imperfections and
mm,
being able to talk about them. So
mm.
it's about creating a culture whereby people are able to bring their whole self to work and people are able to
Yeah.
be transparent around
Mm,
who they are, who they
mm,
truly are. And that
mm,
then takes us into the whole
mm,
area of authenticity, which
mm.
people very often talk about. But I think if you get vulnerability right,
Yes.
you build authenticity. If you get authenticity right, then you build trust in your organization. And trust is foundational. It's foundational for the success of any organization or any relationship that you're in, whether it's a romantic relationship on this side
Yeah.
or whether it's a work
Yes.
relationship on this side or a relationship with your clients. If you build trust, then I think that relationship is more likely to succeed than
And it's a
fail.
meaningful connection, right? And it leads
Yeah,
to a
absolutely.
meaningful connection.
Yeah. So it's a human connection, right?
Correct. Correct.
And
So,
I heard this in the context of sales a long time ago, and what I heard was that people buy from people that they know, like, and trust.
yeah.
And you've probably heard that phrase. So I like to strip these phrases down. So what does that mean? They
Mm,
know, like, and trust. Well, in its very simple sense, it's about they know the whole person. They feel they have a connection with
mm.
that individual, and they often say that you actually you buy with your heart, and then you justify with your
In
mind,
mind.
right?
Yeah.
So you buy from your intuition, but
Yeah.
then you justify with your logic.
Mm,
So if you desperately want to buy this car,
yeah.
at some level you'll be able to justify it with logic
Mm,
inside your
mm,
brain.
mm.
And it's the same with people, I think.
Yeah.
So when you really do like and trust somebody,
Mm,
then the logic will fit into the
mm,
intuition
mm.
ultimately.
Absolutely. I think you're really spot on. I love the work, like we are being like imperfectly perfect. That's something I think I'd really love to pick from you. I'm really curious. Now, the whole context, what you said, let's put it in an
Mm.
organizational context, right? Um, how how this can really elicit or connect with a team or the whole organization, how important this vulnerability, especially in the leadership component. It's not that I'm not trying to divide leadership and management or the subordinate. Everybody needs it, but especially on the context of leadership, how do you think this vulnerability is important?
I think the whole aspect of vulnerability is important at every single level of an organization. And often when you look at executive teams, you often look at executive teams and expect them to have their lives together,
Mm,
right? And the truth the reality can never be further from the truth. I work with executive teams. I'm
mm,
working with executive teams right now that
mm,
are dysfunctional.
mm,
Executive teams that are not operating collectively, cohesively
mm.
towards their common goals and their common objectives and corporate priorities.
Yeah.
And when I strip that down, it is not about a conflict over the priorities. It's not a conflict over the strategies that have been decided upon. Inevitably, turns out to be a conflict between people.
Yeah.
One person doesn't trust another person, or one person doesn't feel they know another person. And this is where vulnerability comes in. The
Mm,
moment that we start becoming more vulnerable, and I'm not talking about, coming into work every single day and saying, "Oh, I'm really useless at this. I'm terrible at this," or, I feel it. I'm not talking about constantly bemoaning
mm,
your situation, but it's about being honest. It's
mm,
about being transparent. It's about being able to say, look, I don't know this area. This is not my specialist area. So I'd welcome any support and any guidance for anybody who knows this area because
mm,
my strength is over here. It is just about accepting that at its very basic level.
mm,
And
mm,
organizationally, every single organization goes through challenges at some point in time. And, I have worked in organizations or worked with organizations that maybe are going through significant budgetary cuts in their
mm,
organization.
mm.
I was just talking to a senior leader yesterday
Okay.
where they were saying that they've got a significant budget deficit of 20 million pounds in their budget. And that, people within their organization are worried as to how they're going to bridge the gap of 20 million pounds. And as we were chatting away, I asked him, I said, well, how are your senior leaders, your executive people talking about this? And he said, well, our chief executive is actually saying, look, this is a real challenge for us, and I don't have all the answers right now. And I feel just as you feel, I feel anxious about where we need to go. But I will promise you that we'll collectively work together to
Mm,
get to where we need to get to. And I thought to myself, well, there speaks a CEO who understands the power of vulnerability. If he were to say, look, hey, this is no problem, it's only 20 million pounds, everybody knows it's a significant issue.
yeah.
And for him to cover up that significant
Yeah.
issue, he's just trying to behave. He would have tried to behave as a leader who is impregnable
Yes.
to the doubts, the worries that most human beings would have. But instead, he chose to be human about that. And I think what that does, it coalesces people,
Mm,
it brings
mm.
people together,
Together.
it creates a one team approach in your organization.
And cool, look, I think that CEO could really would have just put the whole blame onto the economy and the world crisis, the whole war,
Yeah,
right? And says,
yeah,
look, everybody's facing, so you had to pull your socks up, and try to
absolutely.
do. But he chose not to do that, and he chose like being
Mm,
open. So people really believe, and that's the connection and the trust factor. I think you really picked up on the previous context.
yeah.
So I think it's really resonating to the context. So now I'm really curious to know about the human-centered approach. You
So for
speak
me,
a lot.
human
You speak
centered,
a lot on that. So
yeah.
I'm trying to bring the context of resilience and
Mm,
the vulnerability into the picture now. How
yeah.
dynamic these two are for a human-centered leadership approach.
Really good question. And for me to be a human-centered leader, I need to understand for me what that means. And it's a brand that I'm pushing out, and I talk a lot about human-centered leadership. My podcast is called the Human-Centered Leadership Podcast. I have a conference coming up that wants to explore human-centered leadership even more. And I don't think that we've 100% understood it because I'm in this exploratory phase myself. I'm trying to really understand, really get a good definition of what it is to be a human
Hmm,
centered leader. But in its very basic essence, I believe that human centered leadership is about being highly emotionally intelligent, creating cultures that are highly emotionally intelligent. So maybe the question is, so what does that look like? And I know that you also believe in emotional intelligence as I do. You do a lot of work around that. But so what is it? What is it to be emotionally intelligent? What does an emotionally intelligent culture look like? And for me, it's as simple as this. So when I work with emotional intelligence, I am a member of the Institute for Social Emotional Intelligence. So I work with emotional intelligence at a very granular area, 26 competencies that I strip down rather than just the four quadrants that we traditionally talk about when it comes to
hmm,
emotional intelligence. And when you strip it down to these granular levels, you'll see that every single competency is literally the makeup of a human being. Everything from personal power, which is the inner dialogue that we have with each other,
mm,
to things like conflict management, our ability to have difficult conversations with each other, to the bit to the skill set of building trust. How do we build bonds? How do we build trust with
mm,
our relationships around us? Emotional intelligence cultures is about getting all of those 26 competencies right. And when you get that right, you have a culture where you don't need to talk about things like diversity and inclusion anymore, because you create a culture where everybody can bring their whole self to work.
mm,
And diversity is no longer about whether a person is black, brown, or white, or whether a person is male or female, or gay or straight, or old or young. It's not about that. And I think this is where we get things like equity, diversity, and inclusion wrong as well. We traditionally focus and we homogenize people into these little compartments, and we say, so all brown people think the same, all white people think the same, or men think the same, or,
yeah.
and it's ridiculous. It's nonsensical when you think about it. But a human-centered approach is about saying, we have an organization made up of 100 people, 2,000 people, 50,000 people, and every single person is different.
Mm,
Everybody will have had a different
mm,
upbringing.
mm,
Everybody will have had a different education.
mm,
Everyone will have had different exposures, different experiences in their life that have shaped their values, shaped the way they think. And actually, that's to be celebrated, because when
exactly.
you have a collection of individuals who think differently, imagine in this incredibly changing, dynamically changing world in which we exist, imagine the opportunity that you have to have like this incredible creativity and
Mm,
innovation
mm,
and agility and adaptability, because I think that's where organizations need to
yeah.
be. We need to become much more agile. The world is shifting day by day sometimes. A war over here will reshape the way we do things over
Mm,
here.
mm,
A virus has proved to us, a tiny little virus proved to us that it can shut the world down, and therefore we emerge from this virus-ridden world to be completely different. We are, as organizations, we are not the same organization
yeah.
that we were
Yeah.
pre-COVID, right? We have
Mm,
completely reshaped ourselves. So
mm,
we're constantly evolving. And in order to constantly evolve, we need to create cultures that are human-centric,
mm,
that allow people to be themselves, to
yeah.
speak their voice, to speak
Right.
their views, their experience. And I think creating a human-centered culture is about creating that kind of culture where everybody in the organization comes to work feeling valued, feeling appreciated, feeling seen, and feeling heard.
Mhm.
It's as simple as that.
And that human-centered approach brings that it's okay to be not to be okay also at the workplace,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. So, a big thing in the world right now is talking about mental well-being. And only last night, a person that I knew who was a very, who was leading a very senior, in a very senior organizational position. In fact, he was leading an organization in his 50s, apparently committed suicide. And it just goes to show that every single person in your
Yeah.
organization is a human being. And we need to understand the importance of mental well-being in your
Mm,
organization. And that
mm,
forms part of what a
mm,
human-centered culture looks like. It is about human beings caring for human beings, working with human beings, forming relationships with
yeah.
human beings, and all of those on a bridge of trust.
At Parent Thrive, we embrace parenthood together. Join us to navigate the joys and challenges of raising children through connecting with the community. As parents, we connect. As parents, we share. As parents, we learn and grow. Join us at Parent Thrive to start your empowered journey towards parenting.
So we get the piece of the human-centered, right? Now,
Mm.
I just want to give our listeners and viewers who are going to like listen and watch this particular episode, what sort of practical strategies or techniques we can bring to organization or even a unit or small team on this
Yeah.
particular human-centered approach through leveraging vulnerability
Yeah,
in their
that's
leadership.
a really good one. I mean, there are so many little practical tips I think that we can all adopt, and some of these are so simple. They seem too obvious, and but sometimes we overlook the obvious, don't we?
Yeah.
Because we look for solutions that are complex.
Just next to
Anything
you.
that sounds, yeah, exactly. And I see this all the time. Organizations want to have solutions that sound fancy, they sound impressive, they sound complex, but actually the complex solution never rarely works because we're missing all the simplicity.
Mm.
And when you strip everything back and you understand that everything is about human beings, then actually simplicity comes into it. So, for example, what is wrong with just taking half an hour out every single week where the team gets together and people share their vulnerabilities? People share what worked for them this week and what didn't work for them and what challenges they may be having right now, personal or professional, that might affect their performance. Things like that. And you hear stories about African tribes that do this on a regular
Yeah.
basis with their villages and how powerful that can be.
Mm.
And I've heard this in so many sort of management courses, leadership courses, but I very rarely see organizations adopt it.
Adopting it. Yeah.
Sometimes we love to talk about these stories, but we don't have the leadership courage to actually adopt these simple practices because I think they're powerful. So
Mm.
it could be something as simple as that. What I used to do as a leader when I was in the police service, I had a very busy schedule. I was, looking after 400 staff. I was
Okay.
running a multi-million pound department. I was also, gold commander looking for serious or major incidents. I was investigating murders. So I had a pretty busy workload, but I made sure that every single day I took an hour out of my day, an hour out of the morning, and an hour out of the afternoon, whereby I just did what I call management by walkabout. And
Mm-hmm.
I literally just went out and I spoke to my staff and I just had human conversations with them.
Mm.
I found out if somebody was getting married. I found out if somebody was pregnant. I found out if somebody's child was ill. I found out if somebody had done a degree somewhere. I found out if somebody had career aspirations,
Mm.
promotion aspirations, or maybe they wanted to move sideways into another field. I found out if somebody's parents were ill. I
Mm.
found out if somebody had a birthday. All of these things, I think, are so, so important.
Mm.
And what I learned from that, Azim, was this, that the more I formed human relationships with my people, when those occasions arise, and they do arise, where
Mm.
you need lots of people to work beyond their expectations to get a particular project done that might be an
Mm.
urgent project.
Mm.
Whenever I was in that situation, I never struggled to get people around the table to get a project done. They would do that because they felt that they were part of something.
Yeah. Yeah.
We created that one team approach, and that for me was very important.
Mm. I think you're literally saying is like how you showed up in that particular department at that moment
Mm.
because you're inquiring and you're getting there. And one of the technique I always also work and recommend to do is simple, walk slow.
Walk slow. I like
Walk
that.
slow, walk slow on the
Yeah,
aisle. You say hi, connect
yeah.
everyone. Don't just rush into a cabin,
That
right?
reminds me of a piece of wisdom somebody once shared with me. This is 40 years ago. When I first became a police officer, for the first
Right.
2 years, I was on a beat, my community, where I wasn't allowed to go in a police car. I had to walk.
Okay.
And a wise old policeman once said to me, he said, when you're walking, never walk fast because when you walk fast in life, you miss certain things. When you walk slow, you notice things.
Yeah.
And it's never been a truer word.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a brilliant piece of wisdom.
That's
Walk
that's
slow and
that's
notice.
that makes us being more aware about ourselves, what's
Yeah,
around us, at the same time being aware about other people. Right now, you said about
yeah.
going, person's birthday or child. It's not. I think these are simple things, right? So we
These are
can.
simple things, but even that people complicate it. We have to complicate it. So some people will call that mindfulness nowadays, being
Yeah.
in the moment. Well,
Mm.
actually, it's just a normal thing to do. If you
Yeah.
slow down, you notice things more. You're more connected, right?
Less is more now, right? Cool.
Less is more. Less
Right.
is more, definitely.
Right. So, time flies very quickly when we have very rich context. And we are
Yeah, it
coming to the
does.
most important, not the most important, one of the interesting segment I just introduced in this episode, the rapid fire section, right? Cool. I'm going to
let's
ask.
go for it.
I'm going to ask about 4 questions. You can just give me on the spot what exactly is no thinking. And your question number 1 on the rapid fire segment: how does vulnerability contribute to building trust within a human-centered leadership framework?
I think that's a very simple one. Vulnerability contributes to this human relationship, this human capital, as you would call it, in that team, in that environment, in that relationship. And when you are being truly human, and you are showing up as a human-centered leader, then I think it's automatic that trust is an outcome from that.
Fantastic. Super. Your question number 2. Can you name 3 specific benefits that organizations experience when leaders embrace vulnerability in their decision-making process?
Yeah, straight away, I think, whenever I go into an organization and I'm trying to sell them my services, one of the things that they say, well, how do you quantify that? How can you demonstrate that will lead to a better outcome or better result or better performance? And my answer is always the same. If your people feel better, they will always work more. So I think, greater performance for your organization, more solidity in your teams, and more emotional resilience as a result of that, and also a greater capability to coalesce as a team when the going gets tough, because sometimes the going will get tough and you need a team that can bond together very quickly.
All right, I think this one going to be very easy for you. In 1 sentence, describe the role of empathy in human-centered leadership and the connection to vulnerability.
The role of empathy in human-centered leadership. The role of empathy, full stop, is really less about putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, but it's understanding where they sit and reaching out to support them with a logical mind.
All right. And the last one for the day and for this particular session: what is a quick tip for leaders to cultivate culture of openness and vulnerability within their team? I know we talked about a lot, but I wanted something picked from you as another one.
What particular leaders did you say?
Yes. What's a quick tip for the leaders to cultivate a culture of openness? Let's stick there.
Quite simply, just do what I used to do. I know that you're very, very busy people. I know that time is of the essence for you and you have a lot of responsibilities. But trust me, take time out of your day to go and talk to your staff, not about work, but talk to them about them. Understand who they are and share something about yourself as well. If you have a cat, a dog as a pet, if you have young children, if you have stories to tell about your life, share those stories, because it's these human capital stories that are going to create the bonds that will create great teamwork, that will really that will end up with better performance for your team.
All right. I think the tip there for me is leaders need to be great storytellers.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I teach public speaking, and one of the things I always say is at the heart of every great talk is stories. And this is, if you look at any religious book, any historical book, it's all about stories. So tell stories.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's about our rapid fire time, and that's the end of this particular episode also. So my key takeaway is we are all imperfectly perfect. So don't go and find for it. Bring that human-centered approach to ourselves as an individual. So that's my key takeaway. I hope our listeners and viewers got plenty of key takeaways. My special thanks to Kul Mahay, our founder, Ignite Your Inner Potential and Leadership Development and Emotional Intelligence Specialist. Of course, a podcast host as well. You can get connected to Kul via his LinkedIn. Please do connect. Shares wonderful content. And of course, you can log on to his Kul, you want to share about the conference?
Yeah, so my podcast, Human Centered Leadership, it's a subject I'm very passionate about. For the first time ever, we are launching a conference which is going to be both live streamed and it's going to be in person in Birmingham. It's going to be a huge conference, but we are bringing together some top leaders from all sorts of industries to really explore what is human-centered leadership all about. And you can find out more about that on www.humancenteredleadership.co.uk.
All right. So when is this happening, Kul? In March?
This is happening on the 26th of March this year. I'm super excited about it.
All right.
And
So
this is really exploring the future of workplace cultures because it's
absolutely.
changed.
Absolutely. And all the notes and all the details will be available on the podcast note. On that
Yeah.
note, Kul, thank you very much for your valuable time. It has been a great speaking to you on this particular topic.
Thank you. It's been great being here.
Thank you for joining yet another successful episode of EI Cafe with Azim. We appreciate your time and invite you to subscribe to the show so that you don't miss out on the next episode. Write a review and even rate it if you please. You can also follow Azim Sahir on social media. We would also love to hear from you on what topics you'd like us to cover and even who you'd like us to invite to the show. We wish you well until we meet again on another episode of EI Cafe with Azim.